begin to go through the verses of Haggai. We see the four different messages that Haggai is going to give to the people, a real diversity of topics for just 2 chapters. He's really an amazing amount of topics for just a relatively short amount of content in the book. So the temple has been sitting barren for 15 years by the time that God inspires Haggai to speak. The temple platform had been sitting there. The leaders, the priests, and the prophets are all engaged in a serious problem of wrong priorities. And as we read Haggai, we also see there's purity problems. There is selfishness problems. There is concerns about whether we have the power, the ability to do these things. Insecurity problems, I guess you could say. And Haggai wants to target all of these things and say, no, with God these aren't problems as long as we put God's priorities above our own. And what has really been significant to me as I've been reading through this and studying through this last week or two is how relevant this message is. And this haunting sense that we as modern Christians have fallen into a very similar trap that they did thousands of years ago. Not putting God's priorities first. Not that we're not doing the things of the Lord, but we're doing them out of order. We have not put God's priorities first. We have not been serious enough about keeping ourselves pure. We have not really thought about how significant God's power is for the things that God has called us to do. So I think you'll see how significant this message is, certainly not just for the first people that heard it, but for us today as well. And I hope that you will, by the time we're done with the study over the next 2 or 3 weeks, you'll have a real powerful sense of why we need to keep studying the Old Testament, the minor prophets, and someone like Haggai. So let me begin just by talking about the initial rebuke. We'll go the first 4 verses of Haggai chapter 1. We'll go through this slowly because it's very thick, it's very rich what he's trying to communicate to us today, as well as to the people of that day, and we'll take our time through this. So Haggai chapter 1, verses 1, I'll read verse 1 through 4. In the second year of King Darius, the king, on the first day of the 6th month, the word of the Lord came by the prophet Haggai to Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, saying, verse 2, Thus says the Lord of hosts. This people says, the time has not yet come, even the time for the house of the Lord to be rebuilt. Verse 3, Then the word of the Lord came by Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses, while this house lies desolate? Okay. There's a lot going on here. So we want to take a couple minutes to kind of hash through this so that you understand the context and why this rebuke of God's people is so significant and so powerful. Again, to orient ourselves to where we're at, he says it's the second year of Darius, the king of Persia. This puts us in 520. Darius came to the throne in 521, so this is the second year, 520. This is Darius the Great, who reigned over Persia from 521 to 486. So this is the beginning of a very significant and very long reign. And we've already seen Cyrus has allowed the people to go back and to build the temple. And Darius is going to reaffirm that this is okay for the people to build it. We have all this background from Ezra. But that's not what Haggai's focus is. His focus is not on what the political situation that is going on at this time is. His focus is on the people's relationship to God, or the people's lack of relationship to God, how the people are not following through with what God had called them to do. Oh, interesting in verse 1, you'll notice that the prophecy is specifically addressed to Zerubbabel, to Joshua. Joshua is also spelled Jeshua. I think in Ezra it's Jeshua, same person. This is the high priest that came back with Zerubbabel and served apparently in this capacity of the spiritual leader, while Zerubbabel was serving as the political or the administrative leader. It's interesting to me, all of the fanfare of these names in verse 1. They give the genealogy, the son of Shealtiel, the son of Jehozadak. They give the titles, the governor of Judah, the high priest, Joshua. I'm wondering, well, what's all this fanfare for? What is this all about? I'm thinking Haggai is trying to remind these men in particular. Now, we're going to see later that the book of Haggai is addressed to the community. But Haggai focuses in on these two leaders and says, you guys are not leading. You guys are supposed to be, one of you is the governor, one of you is the high priest, and you're both neglecting what God intended for you to do. And I think all the fanfare is an uncomfortable reminder that the leaders were not doing what they were supposed to be doing as leaders. That in itself is convicting. It makes me think, what do I need to be doing? What does my top priority need to be for my own life, for my family, for us as a body of believers? We can't just be leaders in name. If we're going to carry that title, if we're going to carry that, all the fanfare, we have to make sure that we're leading responsibly as well. And I think there's a little bit of rebuke in there. He's holding the leaders' feet to the fire. If you're going to call yourself leaders, you better act like leaders. Verse 2, he gets into the rebuke, and it's a little confusing who's saying what here. But I think we can kind of clarify this. Thus says the Lord of hosts. And I just want to give you a little note about that phrase, the Lord of hosts. This is the term Yahweh Sabaoth. Hosts, armies, whether it's human armies or angelic armies. This is a way, and this is one of Haggai's favorite phrases for God. And we actually see this phrase quite a bit in post-exilic literature. This is the way of saying, listen, we're just a little group of people now. We are the remnant. There's just a small group of us. But God is still our God, and God is still the God of hosts. He is still the God that oversees political leaders, that oversees the armies of humanity, but also oversees the angelic armies. Just because we're small, just because we're struggling, doesn't mean that God is any smaller or struggling. God is still the sovereign God. And the fact that the people are struggling is no reflection of God. It's a reflection of the ramifications of their own sin, their own disobedience to Him. God hasn't lost rank. God hasn't slipped or faltered. Which, by the way, that is theologically completely contradictory to everything that the ancient Near East would believe. Right? The Persian gods are the strongest gods because they beat all the other gods. And now the Persian rulers want to let these people go back and worship their little gods because they want all that prayer support, basically. But keep in mind, your God is still a little god. They're not as good as our Persian gods. Whoever's got the emperor, whoever's got the kingship, their God is the biggest God. Their God is the strongest God. My God can beat up your God. That was kind of the mentality there. And Haggai is inspired by God to remind the post-exilic community that what you're going through, your struggles, your smallness, is no reflection of how powerful God Himself is. He is the Lord of hosts. And when you read Revelation and see the staggering numbers of angels that have to be inspired to the Apostle John, because there's no way he can count how many angels are in the hosts. Numbers that are beyond the comprehension of most people of that day, and frankly, kind of beyond our comprehension as well today. Millions upon millions of angels. That's the power of the God we serve. And even when we struggle, that doesn't mean that God is any less powerful. So this is a favorite phrase, the Lord of hosts, and I think he kind of wants to keep hammering this. You keep reading this, and it almost gets, okay, Haggai, we got it, Lord of hosts. He's more powerful than we were giving him credit for. Haggai hammers this phrase over and over, 14 times in 2 chapters. Lord of hosts, Lord of hosts. Lord of hosts. I think that's very significant theologically for what Haggai is trying to encourage the people at that time to do. That is their foundation. That is the source of their power. The source of their ability and power is not their economic strength, their numerical strength. It is God himself. And for us today, too, we look at how we feel like we're often attacked in the media, how we're often minimized and marginalized by teachers and leaders and philosophers. The reality is that doesn't affect God. God is still as sovereign as he was before these people came on the scene. He is still true. His ways are still the right ways. And in terms of salvation, Christ is still the only way, no matter what people believe. Lord of hosts, and this is that's how he frames God. This is not just the Lord, this is the Lord of hosts. And then what happens in verse 2 is the Lord of hosts is going to echo the perception of the people. Okay, the Lord of hosts, God is not saying this is what's happening. He's echoing the perception of the people. What are the people saying? Verse 2, this people says, the time has not come. Well, what time? In fact, it's kind of interesting. Even the time of the house of the Lord to be rebuilt, it's kind of fun in the Hebrew. It just says the time. It almost pictures two people sitting there talking, and one of them saying, the time has not come. And the other person says, well, what time? Oh, the time for the house of the Lord to be built. And the other guy says, yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's not time. Yeah, let's go back and work on our houses. It's almost casual the way he says it. The time. The time has not come for the. Now, were these people saying this? Were they walking up to the priest and saying, this isn't the time? No, probably not, as much as they were saying it, around the dinner table, as they would look out and see the empty temple platform just sitting there for 15 years. And they'd say, maybe they wouldn't even say it. Maybe they'd just think, we'll get to it. This isn't the time. So, but either way, there is a general, cohesive, corporate perception that has allowed them to justify their inactivity in terms of building the temple, and that perception is, it's not the time to do this yet. Now is not the time. God knows what the people is saying, and I think there is some disjointedness between, well, yeah, we should really get around to that, but it's not really important right now. What is interesting is their appeal to time, as though time were the problem. I mean, do you see what they're doing here? They're blaming an external factor. They're not saying, I'm not ready. They're not saying, I got better things to do. They're blaming an external factor. It's the time. Do you ever, and I know you wouldn't do this with your kids the way I do this with mine, and they come and say, oh, can we do this, can we do that? And I say, oh, this isn't really a good time. Is time the issue, or do I just feel like laying here and not moving? Am I just using time as this broad nebulous, oh, this isn't a good time, we'll do it later. Daily. Okay, I do this. Is time the issue? No, I'm the issue. I just don't feel like doing anything. I don't feel like doing what you want me to do. I don't feel like putting your priority above my own. The problem is not time. It's not schedule. It's not, let me get my calendar and fit you. It's me. So when they say they blame this nebulous external time, that's a complete ruse for their own apathy, selfishness, laziness. You know what's interesting? Remember, Ezra spent chapter 4, 5, and 6 talking about what? He talked about the political opposition that the post-exilic people had specifically regarding building the temple. Now, he throws in some examples that are a little later. We talk about that in chapter 4 as Ezra is trying to kind of build this case about how there is consistent opposition against God's people. But most of certainly chapter 5 and 6 was about political opposition. Haggai does not mention political opposition. Does that mean there was political opposition? No, that was what